Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Ish Limkakeng, Senior Vice President, Data Center Networking Group, Cisco.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys, everybody, for joining us. We have a good, intimate group here. So what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about some of the innovations that are going on in the data center. I've been at Cisco 20 years, and I think we have the best portfolio we have ever had in the data center, and it's a really exciting time to be a part of this space. Hopefully you see this with your customers. You've heard Cisco talk about intent-based networking, and very recently, probably the last 6 or 7 months or so, we've made this a big push. In the data center, we've been on this journey for several years now. And the reason for that is because a lot of the changes that drive the need to change how we do networking started first in the data center. So if you heard Rowan's keynote yesterday morning, he talked about 1 million devices being added to the network an hour. He also talked about hover taxis, but he talked about a lot of these applications and the changes that they're coming. Every one of those devices uses a set of applications that impact a workload that you, our customers, own, or either in your own data center or in the public cloud. So that has driven a lot of need for a more agile infrastructure, a different way of doing networking, and that's why we went down this path of intent-based networking. So I want to take a moment and just kind of give you a sense for what we see and see if it resonates with how you work with your customers in your own environments. When we talk to all of our customers, we see that there are about 6 things that they consistently look to do. The first is pretty straightforward. Let's modernize our infrastructure. And this is a common thing, whether it's network, storage, compute, whether it is converged infrastructure or hyper-converged infrastructure. It's been a very strong product area for us. And this is kind of meat and potatoes. Everybody that we talk to constantly wants to be looking to make sure that they're not getting too far behind in the modernization of that infrastructure. The second thing that we do, and this has been a very common theme as well, is they want it to be open and automated to make sure that what they're putting in place, what you're putting in place, is flexible. It can meet and be programmed in the way that the modern applications demand the infrastructure to work. And it can be done across an open ecosystem with many vendor solutions. As and anybody who has spent time with a real customer knows, there are very heterogeneous environments out there. So the third thing, when we think about all of this, there's a lot of discussion in the industry about over the last 2 years about public and private cloud. And how do we think about it? A lot of what we're talking about has been traditionally considered the on-prem or the private cloud stack. And I think we have the assets at Cisco to really help our customers build this. But ultimately, it's about the workload and the application and where it resides, and how do we make that most effective. And what that means, increasingly, every one of our customers is in some form or another using the public cloud in a hybrid cloud or multi-cloud model. And what they need is, it needs to be a consistent set of applications, a consistent set of policy, and instrumented for a DevOps environment so that we can rapidly move and change their applications. I'm sure everybody here has a mobile phone in their pocket. If you look at that phone, I'll bet you have 10, 12 updates for applications. Uber probably updates my phone every 3 days. Every one of those updates is a change, and it's an application that gets impacted. And so that's why we need our infrastructure, whether it's a managed IaaS or a SaaS service that we're using. We need the infrastructure to be able to keep up, and also to be able to span across the public and private cloud. And then last but not least are the last 2 items. All of this is a dead requirement for it to be pervasive analytics, unlocking the data that is available in that infrastructure and those applications, and of course, pervasive security. If you listened to Rowan speak yesterday, these 2 things came out very clearly. Every one of those trends that he talked about is about using the data that already is available in the infrastructure, in our applications, and harnessing it to deliver new services, and making sure that security is part of the architecture at the very beginning. Many of the problems you have with cybersecurity today, and Rowan, I think, said this quite well, is because the internet was not built to be with security as the first premise. All the original RFCs are about connectivity, about making things talk together. And it was quite a feat, but it wasn't done for security. So this is one of the key drivers of why we need to make a change with intent-based networking and why we need to make a change in how networks are built. Does this make sense to everybody? Does it resonate with your experience? Okay, mostly nods, good. So let me double click a little bit into the data center. I told you that we've been on this journey now for several years with intent-based networking. And at its core, it's a very simple idea. We only build data centers, we only build infrastructure because we have some application that we care about and data that application uses. No other reason to build a data center. I've been at Cisco a long time. I would love to tell you it's just about building beautiful, scalable IP networks, but none of you would build a data center if you didn't have an application you cared about and the data that application used. And increasingly, that application is your customer's experience of how they experience your services, the goods and services in your environment. So what we have to do is we need to drive the infrastructure in a way that serves the purposes of that application. So speak to the requirements of the application, capture the intent of how that application should work, translate that, and then, just as importantly, check to make sure that the infrastructure can actually act on that intent. So that's the first step in intent-based networking. The ability to capture that intent, the ability to translate it into something the networking and infrastructure understands, and check and verify that we can actually do something with that. Now, there would be no point in going through that process of capturing the intent if we didn't also orchestrate it inside the data center, the networking, the services that are associated with that infrastructure. So we have to be able to configure the systems. We have to do it in an automated and a scalable way. Because unless you're a very unique environment, you don't have unlimited time or unlimited budget to do this, the pace at which these applications are coming and devices are coming is only increasing, and doing it in the traditional manner just will not scale. You will not be able to keep up with that. So we have to do the activation phase. And then finally, the third phase, which we've just introduced, and this was actually a big part of Rowan's keynote in the demo piece, is the assurance. The ability to take the intent that we've captured and then orchestrated, but to check, to continuously verify that what is happening, the truth on the ground, what is happening actually matches our original intent. Now, there's a good example. Camillo used it on stage. Boeing, Airbus, they don't stand up a new airplane and push it down the runway and hope it flies. They have done an extensive amount of modeling to make sure that they are virtually certain that it's going to fly. Otherwise, it's a giant paperweight. We have the same problem in our business. So we do our own chip. We do a lot of our own silicon development. Non-recurring engineering is a big expense for silicon development. If the silicon comes back and it's sand, not only are we short time to market, but we're also short a significant expense. So this is a technique that we've done in our development, in software and in silicon, where we do a formal model. We model everything that happens in that environment, and we're able to prove before we actually ever pass a packet. And what we've done is we're taking that to the entire infrastructure. Okay, so these are the three pieces of intent-based networking, and this is how we think this is the important critical functions that every intent-based network needs to have. Now let's talk a little bit about how this fits with our portfolio. The first two steps, translation and activation. I told you we've been on this journey for a number of years. ACI is the place where we capture that intent in the controller. We have the controller where we capture the intent. You can express the requirements of the application and then drive the infrastructure. And of course, underlying that is the Nexus switching portfolio and the Nexus 9K in particular. Now let's take a look at a little bit of what's new and what we've been doing with ACI. ACI fundamentally helps you optimize your network, makes your network more secure so that you can reduce risk and protect your business. And as we look forward, we are bringing it into a multi-cloud environment because everything that we do in the data center is going to be multi-cloud. So we announced this about last summer that we're going to take ACI, what we call ACI Anywhere. We're going to bring the ACI policy model and the capability to the public cloud. We announced this with AWS. You'll see us extend it to all of the major cloud providers. And the idea is that wherever you need to place a workload, you should have a consistent set of policy, a consistent set of security, and it should be a business decision and not a set of technology limitations. We've been extremely successful with ACI. We've been very happy with the progress, and it's thank you with many customers here in ANZ specifically, as well as APJ region in general. Over 4,800 customers. One of the fastest transitions we've ever done in the data center, and so it's a huge success for us. And I want to thank you for the partnership there. If I go a little bit further into some of the things specifically we're doing. ACI, when we first brought it out, was a single site. But it was a very obvious requirement from our customers. Let's extend that to multi-site. Let's extend that across an existing infrastructure with remote leaf. What you see us doing with ACI Anywhere is the logical extension of that. All of those pieces should just look like another site. It doesn't necessarily matter. Today it does, but we should be able to abstract it. It shouldn't matter who administratively owns the facility and the hardware and the HVAC and all of that. At the end of the day, it's just where do you need to place the workload for a business purpose. We're continuing to innovate. One of the things, coming back to the idea that you have to do this in the architecture right up front, containers just look like another endpoint to us. And so anybody who has deployed ACI can seamlessly move into a container-based architecture and a container management, whether it's Kubernetes or any other environment, just like they would manage their virtual machine management. So a lot of other players in the market, this is a major change for them. For us, we conceived of this from the beginning as just another endpoint. And then what you'll see as we go forward in the year, we're going to continue to work with our public cloud partners. GCP is here as a sponsor. Hopefully you've seen some of the work we've done together at HyperCloud. I think Didi will cover a little bit. We will also do a significant amount of work with them in the second half of the year in our networking portfolio. So we're really excited about where this is going. Now, if you remember my original premise, the application is what matters and the data that that application uses. We very quickly figured out that every environment, there are no greenfield environments. Everybody has some set of orchestration, firewall, load balancing, existing infrastructure that they have to support because it's part of what delivers that service or application in your environment. So we started with what we thought at the time was a pretty healthy ecosystem, probably about 15, 16 players. We're well over 60 at this point. So we're really proud of how the ecosystem has grown. If there's something that you don't see up here that you would like us to do, we're open to all of it. You'll see there are companies here that would be classically considered competitors of Cisco. At the end of the day, it's about servicing that application. Whatever we need to do that, we have been pursuing that for the last couple of years. Okay, so the third piece, the network assurance engine. I'm going to get into this a little bit, but what if you could see everything and see a problem before it happens? Let's roll the video.
What if you could sleep?
What if you could sleep peacefully at night, knowing that your network is operating the way it's supposed to?
What if you could take the guesswork out of networking?
Prevent problems from unknown configurers and fix them now.
What if you could be proactive instead of reactive?
What if you could prevent outages in your network before they happened?
Before they happen.
Correct a change before implementing and prevent an outage.
Immediately pinpoint issues in your network.
What if you could make changes and know that nothing could go wrong?
What if you had an extra senior network engineer on your team?
What if you had a crystal ball that would make sure that you knew that no change was ever going to break your network again?
All right, what if you could do that? Network assurance is the guarantee that the intent that you configured is actually happening in the infrastructure. And intent encompasses a lot of different things, all the way down at the base forwarding, bridging, routing, how you've configured quality of service, all the way up to more mid-level things where do we place the VMs? Is it appropriate policy on those VMs? All the way up to compliance, business impacting outage if you fail a compliance audit. All of this is part of assurance. And what we've done with the network assurance engine is we've taken this technique, as I mentioned. We have a complete model, a mathematically accurate map of how this infrastructure should work, from the software all the way down to the networking, down to the silicon itself. And we can continuously verify that what's happening in the infrastructure is what you intended. So think of it as if you had, I like to use the analogy of a traffic grid. If you had a map of the city, and you knew the exact length of every street corner, from every street corner, and you knew the speed limits that were on every street, and you knew the timing of every light, green, yellow, red, where all the roundabouts were, you could actually predict where you would have accidents. If you misconfigured a pair of streetlights before you ever put a car on that street, you would know that these two are going to collide on Thursday at 4 o'clock when we run them, and when it's going to take 15 minutes to get there. You would be able to predict failures before they happened. So that is what we can do with the network assurance engine. We've already had this with customers. We've prevented failures in even our very early beta phases with our customers. We're live with about 40 different customers already. We're very excited about this technology. And the things that we can do, as I said, predict the impact of a change. Because we have this very thorough model, before you make the change, we know how it'll work. This is how we develop software. This is how we develop silicon. This is how Boeing and Airbus build their planes. When they make a change to the shape of the wing, they know what impact that's going to have on fuel economy and speed, et cetera, because they have a model of it. And that's what we've done. We can do this across the entire network and all the services attached to it. And the last piece is we can actually assure, if you think about the use case from a network security standpoint, as well as compliance. If you saw the demo at Rowan's keynote, there was a graph that showed a lot of different connections around a circle that was from endpoint to endpoint within a tenant, very complicated looking graph. What that was a representation of every possible connection that is available in that infrastructure. Not where the traffic is going today, because that may not tell you everything until you see, in my traffic analogy, you wouldn't know you're going to have an accident until you had to send the ambulance. This shows you everything that can possibly happen. So let's talk a little bit about what makes us unique. We've done the hard work to model all of this, but we've also taken a step back and taken advantage of almost 20 years of Cisco experience from our technical services and advanced services. What are the 5,000 most common failure scenarios in data center networking? We take that and we made smart events as part of the network assurance engine, which is an incredible asset, which we even have a hard time accessing if you work with our technical services. We are the only solution that has the combination of the capturing of the intent and the ability to check that in the infrastructure it's actually being deployed and being instantiated. So that deep policy integration is unique. And then finally, we're the only solution which does this from the entire stack of software, all the way through from the VMM management and containers down to the operating system itself, routing, switching, and then all the way down into the silicon forwarding itself. So it's the most comprehensive solution in the industry. So we're very excited about this, but you don't have to kind of just take my word for it. There are a lot of customers that we've already started. Bosch, obviously a large customer of ours in Amir. They had this problem where they have multiple data centers, hundreds of thousands of employees. The changes that Rowan is talking about with devices and applications, they live that every day. What they were able to do was they were able to by using Network Assurance Engine and ACI, they are able to bring a global policy that they could automate wherever they needed the workload, zero-touch fabric deployment, and probably more important than anything else is they had full confidence when they made a migration from their existing infrastructure to the new one that they knew exactly what was going to happen. That is the what if that we get with the Network Assurance Engine and Bosch. And that is the confidence and the peace of mind that we think that this product will deliver. Okay, so we've talked about translation, activation, and assurance, and intent-based networking. And a lot of what I just talked about is how we do that within the networking infrastructure itself. But there's another part to every data center as you kind of go out, which is, of course, the compute and the host that it's attached to. Cisco Tetration does these same functions, translate, activate, and assure, in the host. So you can think of it as a system that protects the hosts from the rest of the world and a system that protects the rest of the world from the individual host. And the two together are very powerful. So how many of you are familiar with Tetration? Show of hands, about a third? Good. So what Tetration does is it captures every packet and every flow metadata about the actual truth on the wire, what is going on. That's different than Candid. It's different than Network Assurance Engine in that, instead of, in my example where I was talking about traffic, this is actually looking at the traffic itself, not so much the street lights, et cetera. It's seeing what actually happened. This is what is going on in your network. And it captures it, and it retains that data. So our first use case for this was for application discovery, but we quickly saw many other use cases. The ability to test policy changes against real data. This is so customers sometimes will come to us, we had a security breach, here's the policy we think that would have prevented it. Today, you have to think about it and say, yeah, I think that'll do it. You put it in place, you hope it does, right? Don't have to do that anymore. We have the actual traffic, the actual attack. We can test it against that and show that we would have prevented that attack. And just as importantly, we didn't break something else. So performance, compliance, security, a lot of use cases have come now with Tetration. And some of our customers, I'm going to just go through a couple of examples. Some of the outcomes that they get, 70% reduction in the time that they had to do application discovery. This is something that is a 100% of our customers' problem. Very few of our customers know or even have an idea of where their applications reside in their infrastructure. Because in a traditional network, when you're not trying to service the infrastructure with the applications, there's no reason to know. Tremendous amount of time and labor and capital expenditure saved. We've seen great traction with Tetration with customers who are trying to have a consistent policy across their environment. Another example was just purely visibility of what's going on in the network. Again, this sees everything that's going, every packet, every flow, records it, and tells you the truth on the wire. So this service provider was able to understand what is the normal behavior. It does a bunch of unsupervised machine learning to profile your environment. And this is a normal, this spike might be a normal traffic pattern. This one is very anomalous, and we need to look into it. Helps you do capacity planning. It helps you do the appropriate resourcing. And so a tremendous asset, and one of the many use cases that we've seen now with Tetration. And then finally, a lot of regulated industries, healthcare. HealthSouth is a provider here, provider in the U.S. They had a need to be able to restrict the traffic, restrict the visibility of and access to the health records. One of the great things that Tetration can do, because it is present on all of the compute, we can enforce policy. Not just discover the application is there, but also enforce what traffic can and cannot go. And so in combination with our security business group and the knowledge of the threats that we have from our other assets in the security team, it's a very powerful enforcement mechanism. So, we introduced, I've talked a little bit about some of the things that we can do with Tetration already, but just this week we introduced a couple of new capabilities that are really exciting. That agent that sits out on the host can now actually do process behavior analysis and profiling. So we can see in the very processes that are running on the compute stack, we can detect things like privilege escalation, which may be a signature of an attack or of malware. We can also profile, because we have the threat feeds from our security teams, we can understand what packages are installed on that compute, and known malware or known threat packages we can quarantine and enact policy against. So it's a tremendous set of assets and capabilities that we have now with Tetration. We're very excited how this works. Brand new introduction, which we announced just earlier this week. So if you haven't had a chance, you should come see it at here in the World of Solutions and get an understanding of what's new with Tetration. Okay, so let's go to the customer video.
Cisco has worked with us on our data center infrastructure, our campus build-outs, but I think more importantly on how we think about delivering our technology to market.
One of our primary goals over here is to manage our east-west traffic. So we're looking at Tetration to help us with microsegmentation. That once we gather the data and then do the analytics through Tetration, it will give us the information we need to do that microsegmentation very well.
Some of the key differentiators that Tetration had that its competitors didn't, first was true diversity in the technology deployment that it was going to provide. I mean, we're putting this technology across all of our critical infrastructure hosting areas, which includes around 70,000 servers in about 14 different data centers around the globe. It had to work in all of those. It had to work in conjunction with everything from our Linux population to our Windows population, and integrate well into our technologies that manage routing and flow throughout our data center. So first and foremost, it was diversity of platform support. Listen, we're not just going to be in our own data centers in 2 years or 5 years. This is truly going to be a commingled multi-cloud environment that'll be heterogeneously located across the globe. So how that technology is going to play into our strategy was as critically important. And the vision and the future product roadmap of Tetration fits well into our plans. And it's going to help us be more proactive, drive faster to market our products, and be able to do things like multi-cloud integration of our security products and technologies into our go-to-market product sets. So it's really exciting from where we stand.
We believe that this is a robust, easier to deploy technology. And we're actually quite excited to get started on the journey.
Okay, great. So that was ADP, payroll processing, enormous payroll processing company. And they have deployed Tetration with us, and they're on this journey with us. I want to leave you with one thing in the intent-based networking. Our data center portfolio at Cisco is the strongest it's ever been. And it is because we have been working with many of you and your partners to address the challenges that you see every day. The explosion of devices, the explosion of applications. And so we're working with you to develop a solution that makes your application delivery, adds, moves, changes, as easy and as cost-effective as possible. The combination of Cisco ACI, network assurance, and Tetration on the fundamental infrastructure of the Nexus switching portfolio, we think we have the best solution in the industry, whether you use a piece of it or all of it. Because at the end of the day, it's about delivering the applications, and it's about delivering it in a multi-cloud environment. So I'm going to invite Didi to come up and take us through the rest of the portfolio and bring us home. Thank you, Didi.
Thanks a lot, Ish. So first off, Ish, I have to compliment you. You went through 30 minutes of a Cisco presentation without showing a picture of a single box. I think that's a first. We usually tend to start Cisco presentations with a family picture of all the boxes that we got. So ladies and gentlemen, I got a long and complicated name. That's why I go by DD, which is the first letter of my first name, first letter of my last name. Ish talked about our innovations in networking. I'm going to cover the other half of our data center portfolio, which is storage and compute. A little bit about me. I've been with Cisco now for a little over 2 years. Before this, I was in startup land. I would bring entrepreneurs together, raise venture capital funding, and build companies, some of them in the area of data center. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is me sitting in your shoes, looking at Cisco outside in. A lot of the stories, the anecdotes that I'm going to cover are really sort of, if you were to look outside in, how is Cisco's strategy in data center when it comes to storage and compute? So when I look at what's happening in data center worldwide, data center and clouds worldwide, I kind of see these three fundamental truths. I call these the three fundamental truths. Ish touched on this a little bit. Every data center on cloud on this planet was built for one reason and one reason alone, which is to run applications. So when it comes to the data center, app is king. Okay? But it's now more important than ever before, right? Because the apps are changing. And the apps are really driving, whether it's competitive differentiation, whether it's the growth strategy of any company, irrespective of the size of the company, the geography of the company, the industry vertical, whether you're in retail or finance or education or healthcare, applications drive businesses. When I landed in Melbourne Airport 3 days back, the first thing I did was fire up my Uber app. And it did not work for 5 seconds. So I did what I usually do when I'm in America, which is fire up Lyft. And then I realized Lyft does not work here either. So then I did the old-fashioned thing of walking to the taxi cab and getting a cab back home. But the point is, if we as consumers are making decisions based on the efficiency of applications, that's exactly what businesses are doing as well. And so if you believe in that fundamental truth, then you have to believe that it's these application developers in our environments that is the new customer. And I'm not necessarily talking about Microsoft, SAP, or Oracle applications. It's the applications that scan our check and deposit money in our banks. It's those bespoke, it's those custom apps that these application developers are developing, and we need to make them happy. Because if we don't make them happy, they tend to do strange things, which I'll talk about in a second. And then the third thing, I think it's been a theme of this Cisco Live, multi-cloud is the new data center. Gone are the days where the data center was defined by the corporate firewall. We bought everything, installed everything, maintained everything, but those days are gone. You're going to have your on-premise data center, you're going to have a private data center, private cloud, and every customer, like Ish mentioned, is trying to see how to harness the power of the public cloud. Okay? Here is an example. This is a bank that you might have heard of. It's called JP Morgan. It happens to be the 6th largest bank on the planet. They maintain assets of about $265 trillion and have 240 employees worldwide. One of the things that caught my attention about JP Morgan is about 15% of their workforce are engineers. These are application developers that are developing applications, all 7,200 of them, and even this data is about 3 years old, so I'm sure the numbers are much higher now. 7,200 custom applications, the ones that scan your checks and deposit money in your bank. They maintain 32 data centers worldwide. So I did some research in terms of the number of employees, and turns out JP Morgan has more engineers than Google. JP Morgan has more technologists than Microsoft. Why? It goes back to the point of applications driving the business. And it's those application developers that are writing these applications. And if we don't make these developers happy, like I said, they tend to do strange things. So this is a public survey from Frost & Sullivan, where CIOs were asked about the software and services that are used in a modern enterprise, which could be mine or yours. And they were asked the question, how many employees, or what percentage of employees, admit to using software and services that are not sanctioned by their IT department? And 80% of the folks raised their hands. At least 5 pieces of software and services that are not sanctioned by their own IT department. You know what? I'm guilty of this. My company sanctioned software for sharing files is Box. I do not like Box. I like Dropbox. I use Instagram for sharing files. My company issued software for email is Outlook. I like the mail part of the Outlook. I do not like the calendar part of Outlook. So I use a SaaS tool called Calendly for managing all of my meetings. Turns out, if there's one department in modern enterprises that is more guilty than any other department, it's IT themselves, who admit to using software and services that are not sanctioned by their own friends. So perhaps it's not very heartening to then learn that only about 8% of CIOs even know how much shadow IT, I've given it a name, that's why the visual, has infiltrated in our environments. Okay? So again, I mentioned two big trends that I see. One is applications drive the business, and application developers will bypass IT, will take matters into their own hands. Not just the application developers, employees like myself who are in marketing will take matters into their own hands if we cannot deliver what the customers need in a modern enterprise, and here's proof of that. Does this make sense? Are you seeing some of this in your environments? Yeah? Okay. All right, so with that, let me switch to the three pillars of innovation on how Cisco is solving this problem from a compute and storage perspective. Ish talked about intent-based networking to solve a lot of the networking problems. I'm going to touch on these three innovations from a compute and storage perspective. The first one is about simplifying operations. Okay? We entered the compute and storage market about 9 or 10 years ago. And then the moment we came out, people were already writing our obituary saying, really, Cisco, you're going to get into the server business? And I think we proved everybody wrong by growing this to a multi-billion-dollar business. And the philosophy was very simple. We drove all the innovation in how we managed our infrastructure. Because every other vendor is going to put a sheet metal around the latest chipset from Intel or any other chips or ASICs that are inside the box. All of the differentiation is how we managed it. So that's going to be my first chapter. I'm going to show you how we're pushing the vector along that innovation to simplify operations, not just in a single data center, across multiple data centers, across data centers and public cloud. So that's going to be the first topic. The next topic is around intent-based infrastructure, right? We talked to you about this in networking. I'm going to talk to you about on the compute and storage platforms, how we are really trying to understand the intent of what our customers are trying to do, the intent of the applications, the intent of scale, the intent around security. So that's going to be the second topic I'm going to talk about. And lastly, you've probably heard it 100 times already in this conference. I'm really going to break it down as to what we mean when we say multi-cloud. So those are the three things I'm going to cover. Okay? So the first one is around simplifying operations. And we've talked about this a little bit. Multicloud is the new data center. And this is a company we acquired back in 2016 called Clicker. Clicker came with this big innovation around hybrid cloud orchestration, which is the ability to move applications from your data center to your private cloud to Azure to AWS and back, based on your security requirements, your compliance requirements. Maybe it's cost, maybe it's what the developers like, for whatever reason. But one of the biggest things that we got when we acquired Clicker was the ability to know how the application is going to perform, how much it's going to cost, if and when if we moved it to another location. And the way it works is what Cisco Cloud Center does, it takes all of the application constructs and the infrastructure constructs and creates this application blueprint. And once you've created that, now you can migrate the application as you need. So this was kind of the first innovation in terms of simplifying the overall data center management, data center and multi-cloud management. The next product I'm going to talk about is Cisco Intersight. We released this product last year, and this is not so much about managing applications across multiple clouds, but really managing UCS and HyperFlex products from Cisco within the private data centers. Okay? And there's three things that really, really stand out about Intersight. One, it's a single management platform for managing the entire Cisco compute and storage portfolio. Whether you've got a B series, a C series, S series, any of our converged infrastructure solutions like FlexPod or VersaStack or PureStack, all the way to HyperFlex. It's a single platform to manage all of these platforms. The next innovation we put in Intersight is that it is cloud managed. So we've done this on our wireless portfolio. You probably heard of a product called Meraki. The biggest innovation in Meraki is not in the RF, in the radios, in the wireless. The biggest innovation in Meraki is the fact that you can manage it from a cloud. So we learned there, and we brought that same innovation to compute. And InterSight is a cloud-managed solution. Whether you've got one data center or 50, you can manage all of it from a single place from the cloud. And the third innovation in InterSight is we enabled telemetry. So now, if you've got multiple data centers, it's up to you on what data you might want to push to that cloud. So we enable telemetry. We're not pulling data. It's completely up to the customers how much data they want to push. But then we correlate that data and drive insights from that data. We can even drive insights from what we see across different customers and drive some baselines, recommend some best practices. So really exciting product. It's only been out for about 6 months, and we've already seen hundreds and hundreds of customers adopt this product. Instead of me rambling on and on talking about the product, I want to invite one of our experts from this region. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Gascoigne, who is the lead technical solutions architect for our UCS portfolio.
Thanks.
Are you Chris?
Good. I'm good, DD.
Good. Having too much fun?
No. I've been very well behaved so far this week.
Okay. You want me to believe you?
Saving it up for tonight with Jimmy Barnes.
Saving yourself.
Yep. It's going to be good.
All right. So we talked a little bit about InterSight. You obviously meet a lot more customers than I do. Tell our friends about some of the typical ways in which customers are using InterSight, especially when it comes to firmware upgrades.
Yeah, right. So like you say, one of the big issues that customers struggle with in operating their server environments is managing their firmware and managing the compatibility between their various different hardware components, the firmware running on the servers, and the operating systems that they're running on top of those servers. And if you look at some of the traditional server vendors out there, they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of PDF describing all of these different compatibility matrices. And Cisco, we've done a pretty good job at making life easier for our customer. We have an online tool to help them go through that process of managing their compatibility. But we thought with InterSight being a cloud-based solution, we can improve that even further. So as those 60,000 servers that are registered with InterSight already, they can now start to get immediate visibility into how their server fleet is matching up with that hardware compatibility list that we publish. And so you can see in this example here, up there in the top right-hand corner there, we can actually see that all of these 3 servers in this environment, we've flagged for the administrator that those servers are currently not in compliance with the hardware compatibility list.
Okay.
And we can even drill down and see the details of why that might be. Is it a compatibility issue between the hardware and the firmware and the operating system or hypervisor that might be running on top of that?
Right.
And so the next most obvious question is, if we can start to automate this process of ensuring compatibility with the HCL, is can we automate the process of upgrading that firmware as well? Yeah, and we can do that as well. So in InterSight, in the dashboard here, we can very simply go and select the servers that we're interested in, select the upgrade firmware button from the menu there, and then fill in a few simple details, and we can update all of the firmware running on all of the servers in our data center in one go if we wanted to, and simplify that process of deploying the firmware.
And these could be servers in different locations, right?
Right, exactly. So because InterSight is a SaaS cloud-based offering,
right.
These data centers could be anywhere over the world, but we have a single portal to manage all the firmware.
So how would somebody do this in the absence of a tool like InterSight? What would they have to do?
So without InterSight, they'd probably have to go, they have to go and download the firmware from, first have to work out what firmware they need, check the hardware compatibility list, download the firmware onto their local machine, go to all of the individual servers, probably if it's not a UCS system, and update them manually one by one, which is a very painful process.
So I'm visualizing you walking around with a stash of big, reams and reams of paper with
trying to flick through and work out what version of firmware to use. It was a nightmare.
Okay. That's awesome. So now tell us a little bit about how we can use InterSight to maybe improve security in the data center.
Yeah, it's a good question. If you look at the recent Spectre and Meltdown vulnerabilities that I'm sure everybody is familiar with from sort of early this calendar year, the way that those vulnerabilities are actually mitigated requires lots of updates to occur. We need to update the microcode on our CPUs. We need to update firmware on server platforms. We need to update hypervisors, operating systems. If we're talking about a hyperconverged platform, we've got to update all those things and the hyperconverged software vendors' software as well in order to mitigate against that. So InterSight, with this capability, we can, especially with Hyperflex, we can actually automate the updates of all of those components from a single place using InterSight to do that.
So let me understand that. So instead of having to patch, just CPU separately and then, different other components separately, it's a single place.
Correct.
Hit the easy button.
Exactly.
Okay.
Single place to do updates for that entire stack, and you got all of the information about what patches to deploy from a single vendor being Cisco.
That's awesome. So the other thing I hear a lot is Hyperflex is not just being installed in the data center, but in a lot of environments where they're a distributed enterprise, like the bank example I gave, or a retail store. There's, even in branch deployments, we're putting Hyperflex. In those environments, how does InterSight help?
Yeah, well, when you're deploying any hyperconverged solution into a large number of branches that are distributed throughout the country or the world, the biggest problem is how do you actually get the platform stood up and deployed into those environments. You either have to ship the hardware to your central office, stage it all, and then ship it out to the remote location, or you get it shipped directly to the remote location and have to send a person out to go and deploy and configure the platform in those branches. So InterSight helps in that space as well, where we can actually get the hardware for Hyperflex shipped directly to the branch sites, to all of the branch locations, get them just plugged in and powered on by a tech that might be on site, and then all of the installation and deployment of the Hyperflex software onto that platform is done from InterSight. So you get a single place to do all of the deployment, and then a single place to do all of the ongoing management of that hyperconverged environment running in all of our branches across the country.
That just sounds much faster. And now this InterSight could be in a public cloud, but you could also have it on your on-premise data center, right, if the customer so chooses.
That's right. We do recognize that some customers, are never going to be able to leverage cloud-based solutions, and they are going to need an on-premises offering. So that's coming along with InterSight as well.
Excellent. Chris, thank you so much for your time.
No worries.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thanks
a big round of applause for Chris. All right, so moving on, let's look at the second chapter of intent-based infrastructure, and I can't think of a better example than Hyperflex. You actually cannot walk in this conference for more than 10 steps without seeing a Hyperflex poster, so this has been a really, really successful product for us. We've had it in the market for about 18 months, close to 3,000 customers. This product is absolutely on fire, and the reason why it's on fire is kind of captured on this chart. When I look at some of the first-generation products in the hyperconverged space, they took some shortcuts. They, I think, got the compute and storage bits right, but they forgot the small little thing called the network. And then when you kind of combine all of these infrastructures, that's where all the bottlenecks started showing up. And so for the first few years, what most of our customers did was they used non-mission critical workloads, VSI, VDI, Robo, or virtualization. Kind of the tier 2 applications were relegated to be installed on something like Hyperflex. But we built this from ground up, all the way from hardware, to leverage a lot of the innovations in UCS. And then we recently bought a company called SpringPath, and what we got from SpringPath was a truly distributed operating system that was custom built for hyperconverged solutions. Liz talked a little bit about this in the keynote this morning, just comparing how our software stack is fundamentally different, simpler than some of what we saw with the first-generation solutions. And then the other big advantage of doing that is now we could scale elastically, scale on demand, irrespective of this application. So what we did recently, about 6 months back, is we got an analyst firm called ESG, and we took a Hyperflex, it was a 4-node cluster, and we compared it with some of the other solutions in the industry. I know this is being recorded. I'm not going to name the other solutions that were used in this bake-off, but you can guess the ones that I'm talking about. And we kind of torture tested this, not with the, I call it lightweight applications, but we simulated SQL traffic, OLTP traffic, and then we kind of tried to see along the x-axis, you'll see, this is the picture over here, you'll see we increased the number of VMs that we used in this test. And on the y-axis, it's measuring the number of IOPS that each of the VMs was able to show. Now, the picture on your left is the performance with HyperFlex. And you'll see we scaled the number of VMs all the way to 140, and we actually stopped at 140. Most of the other solutions could not even get to 140 VMs. And then the other thing you'd notice is that the IOPS, the latency, is just all over the place, which is the scatter chart that I show here. Sometimes it was as low as 64, all the way to about 1,000. So in my mind, what is more important, what I hear from customers is more important than low latency is consistent latency. You want to be able to guarantee the SLAs to your internal customers. And so having a rock-steady performance, irrespective of the application, irrespective of the scale of the application, is something that our customers are really looking for. And all of this is available in a report, this report that was done by ESG. You can download it from the Cisco webpage. Here's another example we recently did. We were actually the first hyperconverged solution to clear SAP's SD benchmark test. You probably know it's the sales and distribution part of the SAP application, one of the most commonly used portions of the ERP applications, and we're the first hyperconverged vendor that passed this test. Again, to prove the point that it's not just for tier 2 applications, but we're really finding hundreds of our customers using HyperFlex for mission-critical applications. Just a show of hands, are you guys familiar with HyperFlex? Yeah, not the Cisco guys. I know Cisco guys obviously know about it. All right, I highly encourage you to stop by our booth. You'll see a whole wall of HyperFlex solutions. Just 5 minutes of your time will be well worth it, I guarantee you. All right, moving to the last chapter, multi-cloud. I'm first going to talk about a few key partnerships that we announced just in the last 6 months. Absolutely a part of the Microsoft Azure Stack solution. These are now shipping. We announced them back in, I want to say, May or June of last year. These are now available. And if you're already existing users of Azure or looking to expand your Azure footprint on-premise, based on UCS, we've got the Azure Stack solutions, and they're available today. The next one, if you watched the technical keynote earlier today with Liz and Tony, you saw Google join her on stage. This is a great partnership for us, and I like the way she described it. It's not just a partnership on PowerPoint or paper. This is actual co-development, co-engineering, both companies, and jointly supported. And for some of the first use cases is around using Kubernetes. We announced the Cisco Container Platform that integrates the Kubernetes solution with HyperFlex, also available with other parts of the portfolio. We've talked to you in the past about our Contiv solution. Again, in the world of containers, how we're evolving networking and compute to support containers and microservices. And the last one is Docker. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but we looked at a little bit on Kubernetes. We're absolutely a part of Docker's solution. Docker announced their Enterprise Edition about 6 months back. We were one of the first vendors that were qualified and a part of that solution. And again, this is not just partnerships. We have CVDs, Cisco validated designs that are available where we've actually tested the product, and we make all of that available to you. The last thing I'll touch on in terms of multi-cloud, so I talked a little bit about the partnerships, but what we're also doing is we're taking our existing products and making them available from a public cloud, right? So we call this Cisco's multi-cloud portfolio, and we've aggregated them along these 4 buckets, if you will: cloud advisory, which is mostly technical and professional services, as you plan, design, etc. And then Cloud Connect, Protect, and Consume. I think those names are self-explanatory. I want to just highlight the ones that are applicable for the data center, and those are Tetration, Cloud Center, and AppDynamics. So Tetration is a great example. When we first shipped Tetration about a year and a half back, it was only an on-premise solution. And then we evolved it, and then we made it available not just on-premise, we made it available in cloud. Tetration today is available from AWS. So if you've got workloads in Amazon, you can use Tetration. Again, this is a big change in the strategy of the company. This is coming from Chuck all the way down, that we're not just going to build products that are available on-premise. You've got to design it to work on-premise as well as any public cloud. And so we're fully committed to that. All right, Ish showed you this chart. I'm going to try and bring this whole iTalk, just to wrap it up, put the whole thing together in terms of, we talk to you about what we hear our customers wanting to do. They're looking to modernize their infrastructure. Everything has got to be open and automated. About 50 to 60% of our customers are trying to build private clouds. They're building platform as a service, especially for those developer-intensive environments. And then every customer I talk to is trying to harness the power of the multi-cloud, which could be a managed cloud, it could be a SaaS service like a Salesforce or a Workday, or it could be just infrastructure as a service from Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, or whoever else. So this was the problem statement that Ish highlighted at the beginning of the session. So now you know where I'm going with this. I'm going to overlay this with the Cisco shopping list. And so this is what how all of our products fit into this architecture. If there's one chart, you want to maybe take a picture of and say, Cisco talks a lot about multi-cloud. What is Cisco's multi-cloud strategy? This is that chart where it shows you we're absolutely committed to our on-premise traditional data center solutions. We're modernizing, automating it, but we're also making all of these innovations and acquisitions to help our customers on their journey to multi-cloud. You see AppDynamics at the top of the chart. Again, it helps customers with their workloads if they're on-premise or in a multi-cloud environment. Okay. With that, I come to the last chart. I'm not going to talk to this. Previously, I used to call this the customer journey with Cisco's multi-cloud and data center solutions. I've stopped calling it a customer journey slide because what I realized is customers don't want to be told what their journey is. Each of you are going to have a different journey. Each of you are going to have your own unique requirements around security, compliance, the nature of your applications. But you are on a journey. And in the next 2 to 3 years, all of you are going to have to think about these 5 pillars. You might start from left to right, go right to left, but over the next 2 to 3 years, you will have to think about each of these. And as you go back from this conference, and again, you probably will see about 5,000 slides during these 3 days. This is a good checklist as you go back and you think about automation. What do I really need to do? I find this as a good checklist to give to my customers. With that, we'll conclude our session here. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the event.